Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, each of you, for joining us again today. Welcome to the second webinar surrounding COVID relief funding that the Cherokee Office of Economic Development has hosted in partnership with the Cherokee County Chamber of Commerce. My name is Heath Tippins, and I'm the Vice President with the Cherokee Office of Economic Development, and it is my pleasure to briefly introduce our panelists, again in the order they will be speaking, and give you the format for today. First, we have Misty Martin, President with the Cherokee Office of Economic Development. Next, we have Pam Carnes, President of the Cherokee County Chamber of Commerce. Third, the Honorable Barry Loudermilk, U.S. Congressman representing Georgia's 11th Congressional District. Congressman, thank you for your time.
Pleasure.
Daniel McCoy, Business Consultant with the University of Georgia Small Business Development Center at Kennesaw State University. Daniel, thank you for your time. In a moment, I will pass to Misty, but as in the previous webinar, viewers will be able to submit questions by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We'll be taking questions throughout and addressing at the end of each speaker versus the end of the program. Again, thank you to the Chamber for partnering with us on this, and thanks to the viewers for joining us. Misty?
Thank you, Heath. Welcome, everyone. We're pleased to be able to offer this very timely webinar and appreciate the willingness of Congressman Barry Loudermilk and SBDC's Daniel McCoy to present today. I also wanted to thank Shauna Mercer from our office, who is our Workforce and Communications Manager. And for those of you that may not know, she used to also be on the Congressman's team as his Communications Director. And she helped us organize getting him here today. So thank you, Shauna. And I feel like I need to thank John Wallace from your team, too, for making our introduction a few years ago and so that we could join, or Shauna could join our team. I also wanted to thank Congress Loudermilk and his staff for also always being willing to assist the people of Georgia, and especially in his district. And the last bit of travel our family did to DC was over winter break, and Hope Lewis from your office organized a great tour of the Capitol. And my youngest son really liked your office and said that you must be really tall because that was a big chair. And in all seriousness, Barry and Daniel, thank you for giving your time today to help Cherokee's businesses navigate this tough time and come back stronger than ever. And at this time, I'd like to turn the program over to Pam Carnes of the Chamber for comments and to introduce Congressman Loudermilk. Thank you.
Thank you, Misty, and I hope everybody's having a great afternoon. Congressman, thank you so much for being on our call, and Daniel, we appreciate your time as well. I know you're both very busy, and we appreciate what you're doing for us today. To Misty and Heath, and definitely Shauna, yes, thank you for arranging that, and we appreciate the partnership again today to present this COVID-19 webinar, and we are definitely all in this together as we continue to grow stronger as a community. In talking about how we would present things today and looking at what our next webinar would be, Misty and I knowing what was coming down the pipe relative to the approval on funding yesterday, it just seemed right that we would invite Congressman Loudermilk to be with us. We know that it was a quick turnaround for folks to receive that information, plan that on their Friday afternoon, and be here. But we are very appreciative of your time, and especially for the viewers too, to take time from their day. It is an honor for me to introduce Congressman Loudermilk, and many of you probably feel like I do that he's our friend. That when he went to DC a number of years ago now, back in 2014, he went there as similarly the same person that many of you are. He went there as a small business owner. He also went there as a level-headed conservative. He went there as a father, a husband, a father, a grandfather. So he wears many of the hats that you all wear. And I think when you know that you're represented by someone at the nation's capital that sees the way you see things, that understands what it's like as a small business owner to be worried about your people and your products, your payroll and your purpose, that it says a lot when we have someone like Congressman Loudermilk who is listening out, looking out, and working on our behalf. So, Congressman, thank you again. We appreciate your conservative values. We appreciate the time that you give to this congressional district and all that you do for not only the citizens of Cherokee County, but the citizens of Georgia and across this country that rely on you for your small business expertise, you're a veteran, and that gives you even another tick mark and a feather in your cap because you have served and you have kept our country safe. So thank you for all you do. Hope that you and Desiree are doing well. You're up to 4 grandchildren now. So I hope you're actually able to spend some time with them perhaps during this downtime. But thanks for being with us, and we appreciate your comments today.
Well, thank you, Pam and Misty, and everyone who was involved in this. Yeah, you guys have a great person in Shauna. We miss her. Hopefully her job is a little easier there than it was with us. I mean, she had to not only deal with the day-to-day grind of Washington, D.C. and the communications of a congressional office, and it always changing, but then I didn't make it any easier on her by being in shootings and train wrecks and car wrecks that she had to paint a pretty picture of. So hopefully things aren't quite as dramatic there for her, but we really do miss her. And I think John does a great job for us. I can't express enough of our team, of how they perform, especially during this COVID-19 crisis. Our objective going into this was to be in constant communication with the people in the district, especially the businesses, because being a small business owner in the past, I know how dependent small businesses are on that continual revenue coming in. Unlike larger businesses that generally have large cash reserves, most small businesses do not. And so we wanted to first, see how they're doing, how they're coping, what can we do? As a conservative, it kind of puts you in a bad position when you're going forward and you're looking at bills that are spending billions of dollars going forward. But this is a little different situation than we've seen in large bailout bills before, because this isn't a bailout like we saw in 2008. In 2008, the financial crisis happened because of mismanagement, because it was fiscal irresponsibility by certain businesses and government as well. This was different. This was an attack on our nation. It was an invisible enemy. And the response required that many states shut down businesses. And so the government actually created the economic crisis. So that in the government, we felt, okay, since we created the crisis, we put the brakes on the economy. We have to provide some way for businesses to continue to operate so we don't slide into a great recession, as much like what happened in 2008. The good news on it is when we're looking at the numbers between now and 2008, even when you look at the numbers of March and April, some of the key indicators that we look at on the Financial Services Committee is retail sales and several other factors that we saw significantly drop off in the 2008 financial crisis. While we've had significant drop this time, they're still less than half of what we saw in 2008. The other story is in 2008, those continue to drop over time. We anticipate that these will start to pick back up again as stores open, as restaurants open. The other aspect of this that was different, we're working with the administration, with the White House, with my friend who's Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows. He's Chief of Staff for the President. We've stayed in close contact. Was how do we respond? And I give a lot of credit to the administration of using the free market system, private industry, as well as federalist ideas to get through this. The president has actually made history during all this, because there has never been a national crisis in the history of the United States in which the federal government didn't grow or gain more power until now. Because he's using a federalist model, he's leaving the decisions up to the states, leaving the front end work to the governors, to the local municipalities. And then when the idea was, let's create a program that's geared specifically to small businesses, that small businesses can access revenue to help them, actually access cash to help them make it through this very troubled period. The Treasury Department was able to set up some tranches of funding for liquidity for larger businesses, for the Coca-Colas, the Deltas, those that have massive amounts of employees, but they also have reserve funds. They just need access to leverage what they have. And so that was able to be done through the administration, but Congress had to act in a way to provide something for small business. Before we actually moved anything in Congress, the PPP program predominantly, the administration took several steps, which is kind of leading into where we're going to go from this point. the first thing that the administration did is once they declared the national emergency, they started using those emergency powers to roll back regulations, identifying regulations that would get in the way of us doing things efficiently. And not surprising to me, but surprising to some, there were scores of regulations that were creating the red tape and bureaucracy that had to be suspended. Where we're going from here is I'm working on a couple of committees that we're leading the way and saying, if we rolled those regulations out of the way to do something efficiently, why do we have them to start with? So we're going to be looking at the regulatory environment and seeing what is it that we need to get rid of. One thing that working with the administration, we identified, government doesn't do really anything effectively or efficiently other than defense. But still, especially when it comes to loan programs, it usually takes years from something becoming an idea to getting it through Congress, to getting it rolled out, to building up the bureaucracy and getting the money to the businesses or whoever the money is designed to. It is a huge problem to get this stuff started. And we're talking about doing something in weeks. We developed this PPP program literally in a few days. The president rolled it out and loans were being made in a record amount of time. The only way that happened is because the president decided, let's not let the government make the loans. Let's let private industry and business, especially the banking system, our local bankers, as well as the large banks. And so we knew there was going to be some hiccups. At least I did, and most of the conservatives knew that when you're trying to get a bureaucracy, that we decided to let the SBA administer it. One thing to understand, and where there's been a lot of misunderstanding and a lot of confusion of the PPP program, it is actually a Treasury Department program run by Secretary Mnuchin. But the Treasury is not designed to deal directly with constituents out there. So they wanted to use a model that existed, which was the Small Business Administration. But they also know, even though it's one of the smallest bureaucracies, it's a bureaucracy. And anyone who's used the SBA before, which is a great agency, it takes time. It takes a lot of time to go through all the paperwork and all the red tape and the bureaucracy to actually get those loans out there, which we knew we didn't have time for. So what they used is the SBA as a model to actually back the loans. They're underwritten or secured loans that the banks are actually making. The banks are loaning their own money, but they're being backed by the SBA. And so part of the problems we ran into is the Treasury had their idea, Congress had our idea of what we wanted to do, but the SBA has this set of rules that they were trying to use, that they use in their typical small business loans, but it wasn't working in this instance. And so there was a lot of back and forth. And this is where I give a lot of credit to our staff and especially you out there in the business community. As we started seeing the problems, we sent our field out making phone calls, our field team, to get feedback. What are the issues? So hopefully we could resolve those quickly. And also give a lot of credit to the administration, especially Secretary of Treasury, who gave us a direct hotline that we were able to feed information back. And they were very quick to make some changes to get this rolled out. There's plenty of success stories of how PPP has worked well. There's also a lot of frustration with it by people who didn't get their loans. It has been very successful in the aspect of it ran out of money. The $350 billion that was allocated ran out in a matter of days. Now, most of when you make the application, the bank is actually going to make the first approval, which is it's their money. But then they're waiting on this e-file number from the SBA, who says the SBA has said, we will guarantee that loan. As soon as you get that e-file number, you're locked in. You're going to get the money. And the bank has 10 days from that approval to get the money to you. Now, that money goes out in the form of a loan. But if you meet the criteria that you use it to pay your employees, all of your employees, you keep them paid for that 8-week period, then that amount, which is the amount of your payroll for 2 months plus 25%, then that turns into a grant. And so once it goes into a grant, then the SBA gives the bank the money that they had loaned to you. If you decide, and some businesses have decided, look, I've got it, but I'm going to restructure my business, so I'm going to keep some of them on. I'm not going to keep the others on, and I'll just roll this into a loan. It's a 2-year loan. I think it's 1% or 2% interest rate, very low interest rate. I'll just use it alone. That is an option that businesses have. But it has been geared for small business. Yesterday, we passed another $320 billion to go into the program. So I anticipate that is going to run out very quickly as well as soon as the SBO opens it up. Several questions people have had that we don't have clear answers on yet because it is an evolving program. We made some tweaks to it. But many of you have loans that the bank is approved, but you're waiting on the e-file number and the money's ran out. Are you still in queue? The answer we have right now is most likely yes. We're trying to get a definitive answer from the SBA, but they hadn't really, I guess, gotten through the process of working with the Treasury to get the guidelines out there. I don't know why it wouldn't be there. If all you were waiting on is the e-file number, you should be in queue to go ahead and get the money. Another aspect of this is people are asking all the time, some get frustrated. I put my loan in, but it took my bank so long to process it. And I'm not preferring one type of bank over the other in this, but the facts are the smaller the bank, the faster people are getting their money and the greater approvals. We actually have a small community bank in the 11th Congressional District in Cobb County that has in the first tranche of money, that first $350 billion, they got more loans than Wells Fargo did nationwide. Just the small community bank in Smyrna, Georgia, or in Vinings, did more loans than Wells Fargo did corporately. And so that'll give you an idea because they're closer to the customer. They don't have a lot of the big corporate customers are trying to deal with as well. And so they were able to get the loans through on a timely basis. So going forward, I tell people if you have the option to go to a smaller community bank, the likelihood of you getting your money, especially for small businesses, is greatly improved. Another thing that's happened over the weekend is we saw there's a couple of issues with the PPP program that came to light. We anticipated it was going to be a problem, and it did come out to be a problem. Most everybody is aware of Shake Shack and Ruth's Chris, which were, when we designed it, and we wanted it to be to the aspect of if you had restaurants that were franchised, that they're truly owned by the local operator, by somebody locally owns the restaurant. They're just using the franchise, for the marketing, the name ID, and their supply chain. We wanted them to be able to actually be able to get the PPP loan, but it wasn't designed for the corporate-owned restaurants because they have other programs that they can access money. Unfortunately, some found a way to work around it and they took a good share of the money. However, over the weekend, I know Shake Shack has said they're going to repay all the money. They're not going to take it. Some others are coming out today saying they're going to repay the money. So it's going to add a little bit more into the coffers to get to the small businesses. And the last thing I'll bring up before we, I guess, take some questions is there's a lot of concern over the 1099 issue. And that's something I've been working on from as soon as this thing was rolled out, because the CARES Act was written in a way of which employers that have 1099 employees, you have those contract employees. And I've worked in many businesses that use those. I used them in my business. My dad was in construction. I grew up in a construction family. I know what it's like to have true contract labor. It was designed to where the employer could file for the PPP using the payroll of the 1099s. Unfortunately, when the Treasury Department rolled it out, they did not include that. It wasn't specific. So there was a lot of confusion going into it. We're still advocating to get that changed. I sent a letter to the Secretary of the Treasury. We had several other members of Congress sign on to it to make sure this happens. I've talked to the Secretary directly. I'm not really sure what their hesitation is, other than they were afraid of some employees double dipping to where the employer files for them, but they also have the option to go in and file for themselves. But there is a way they can cross-check that. Here's the problem that we've seen in the way that it's been handled so far. They allow the individual employee to go in and file for themselves if they're a 1099 employee. And when I spoke to Secretary Mnuchin, I said, here's a couple of problems that this creates. First of all, when the employer can file for the 1099 employees, he files for that, whatever his payroll is, for over 2 months, plus 25%, and that 25% goes to help pay his rent and utilities and other costs that are approved under PPP. When his 1099 employees are filing individually, they are receiving that money, not the employer. And so he's cut short on his ability to actually cover the cost PPP was able to cover. The other aspect of it is we actually still have some employees out there that are double dipping, in that the employer has filed for himself because he couldn't file for the employee. The employees are actually filing, and some of the employees are going and getting the additional unemployment benefits. And so by not allowing contractors to file as an employer of 1099s has created another problem. We're hoping that they're going to work through the weekend to get this resolved, but we don't know. We're still fighting to try to fix that problem. So I hope that was a good update. We did add a few other things into the PPP program. We added some support for local hospitals because the hospital's been devastated. People say, "Are you kidding? They're full of COVID patients." Well, their profit really comes from those elective surgeries that pretty much have been shut down. And so fortunately, Governor Kemp has opened that up again. So the hospitals will be able to start serving people. People can get their health care going again. And then we also have included some money in there. And there's also a lot more money for testing, because as we start opening up the full economy, testing is going to be a key element, especially for larger employers, to provide testing for the employees that come in, especially those that work in a close environment. And so that's some of the other money that was included in there. So Pam, I know we need to do some Q&A, and so I'll open it up if you're ready to do that.
Congressman, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate how quickly y'all moved on this. I mean, I know it means a lot to everyone how fast y'all moved. During your discussion, you covered a number of the questions that were presented, but we do have just a few quick ones if you have time.
Sure.
One attendee noted that there was still a notice for a lapse of appropriations on the SBA website. They were wondering if you can do anything about that and if you could reapply there now. That may be a question that we should present later, but you may know the answer off the top of your head.
Well, they're not going to change that until the president signs the bill. And I don't know that he has signed it yet. I literally left DC. I couldn't even get a flight to Atlanta last night. Had to fly through Charlotte. I didn't get in till 1 a.m. And it was quite an interesting flight flying through those storms, by the way. But we got in early this morning. I've been doing conference calls, and also apologize in advance if you hear some other things. Well, I just got an alert that POTUS the president just signed it about an hour ago. So they will be updating it, because technically the money still wasn't there until the president actually signed the bill. So about an hour ago. I've been on conference calls, and also apologize if you hear some noise, because I'm doing so many of these. We're having the internet upgraded and new Wi-Fi put into my house so we can get better connectivity everywhere. So if you hear some construction, that's what's going on. But I would anticipate, of course, they would not update the site until the president actually signed it, because legally that money's not there until he signs it. So I imagine it will be updated today sometime.
Yes, sir. Thank you. One last quick question. There's discussion in Congress about another large stimulus bill. What are your expectations around that?
That one's probably going to be a little harder, because one of the things that we had enjoyed going up until actually the CARES Act hit some partisan roadblocks, is we had enjoyed a lot of bipartisan support. You know, the nation was in a crisis. We were in a wartime footing. So everybody pretty much came together. There wasn't a lot of partisan bickering, but the further we get away from that, the more it's coming back. This CARES Act was delayed almost 2 weeks. Our idea was, look, we just needed to get another $250 to $300 billion in PPP. The Senate can pass that on unanimous consent, get it over to the House. We can easily get a quorum there and pass it. It was very narrow, very structured. my colleagues on the other side wanted to use that to add some other things that we were okay with, except for the money that had already been allocated for those other things had not been totally spent yet. This was something that was spent. We had to allocate quickly. And so that's where the partisan politics comes in. When you start going to phase 4, there's already starting to be some discussion about what is that going to be. Is it going to be money for states, cities, county governments because of the loss of their tax revenue, which is a real thing. I mean, just as we've caused the businesses to lose revenue, we being our governments together, we've also really cut the tax revenues of the local cities and counties, which they rely heavily on. So it's something that we need to address. I don't think this bill was time to address it because here in Georgia, we don't even have all of the March sales tax reports in yet. And it'll be May before we get April. So we don't even know what the true impact is. And so I think we should wait a little bit. The president wants to do infrastructure. I think that would be more in the line of what I think the willingness of the Senate and Republicans in Congress would be, because that is a bill that he's been talking about doing for quite some time. So the ideas are going to be thrown out there. I think you're probably going to see something, as you've seen lately. Most of these start in the Senate instead of the House. Predominantly, Senate is the one that's harder to get something through because of the rules. You got to have 60 votes, et cetera, et cetera. The big issue we're finding right now is it's a whole lot easier to get a quorum of 100 people than it is 435. So it's easier to get the senators in there because of a smaller number to get them to work on it. There's less exposure in the Capitol. And so I think until they actually lift this ban that we have, where all we're doing is going back for votes and turning around and coming home, is you're going to see probably more activity in the Senate. Under the current environment, they're probably the better, I wouldn't normally say this, but they're probably the better House or better chamber to actually get something going that we can just modify in the House.
Yes, sir. Thank you. At this point, Misty, I'm going to flip it back to you.
Okay. Thank you. Congressman, I was going to show you this one thing, if I can get this to work. Do you think he looks comfortable in your chair?
Oh, yeah. Oh, goodness. Yeah, that was pretty recently.
Yeah, it was in February. He had a great time. Highlight of the trip for sure. Well, Congressman, thank you so much. I know that you all have put a lot of time in representing all of us and trying to make sure that we pull through this as quickly as possible. So thank you so much. I know you probably have to jump off of the call now. You're in high demand. So
well, we got a few more things, but just so you know, I'll be on Fox News this evening during Shannon Bream's show, mostly talking about Georgia opening up for business, which I support what the governor's doing. And so, again, it's not a mandate. It's just removing the government regulations for those who want to open and start earning the revenue. So I think Georgia's going to lead the way in the country. And I've been telling this to our colleagues who've been trying to figure out how to open the government. Said, let the free market do it. All you have to do is have one state start to open, and the competition will put pressure on other states to start open as long as they can do it safely. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
Well, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you.
We also have Daniel McCoy here with us, and you guys may have met him. He comes regularly up to Cherokee with our companies. What you may not know about him is that he's a Reinhardt graduate, so that's even better. And he's a business consultant with a small business development center out of KSU and has been there since September of 2018. And we appreciate, Daniel, your commitment to our businesses and those of our region, and also for guiding our companies through this new funding over the last few weeks and going forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Daniel.
Oh, terrific. Thank you so much, Misty. If I can, I'm going to steal the screen. And I, unlike Congressman Loudermilk, have to depend on a PowerPoint. So hopefully we can get this walk through. As Congressman mentioned, things are changing constantly, daily. It's funny, the last CARE Act, there was, I believe, 3 different interim final rulings. So sort of a contradictory in terms between there. And we anticipate several more. Congressman mentioned the 1099 issue, which is an ongoing nightmare, has been from the outset. So, I understand the frustration of many of you when it comes to that. So, Misty, can you see the PowerPoint okay? Are we good?
We can see it. Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, terrific. So just a little bit about who we are and what we are. The SBDC actually started here in Georgia, out in Athens. If you've never heard our elevator speech, a professor there saw the farmer extension program where the farmer would bring the dirt to the agent would say, you need to add calcium or whatever, go back and start, grow it better crops. So a professor said, well, why isn't someone doing that for businesses? Thus we were formed. The next one was in California, and we're now in every state in the country, in the United States, and a few foreign countries. We have 17 in the state of Georgia. As you can see there, we're actually about to add the 18th before everything happened, which will be at Morehouse University. So we're here as a resource. President Carter picked us up and funded us. So we're a free resource to small businesses in the state. So the things we're going to discuss this afternoon real quickly will be the things that have occurred under the CARE Act and the Family First Act, the SBA Loan Guarantee Relief Program, the EIDL loan as it's called, the EIDL Advance, the Paycheck Protection Program, and the Emergency Bridge Loan. So I'm going to click through these pretty quickly. As mentioned earlier, President Trump signed into law today an additional stimulus package. It consisted of $60 billion added to the EIDL loan, which is funny because the EIDL loan was actually just funded for $9 billion to start out with. So that's major, more money coming in. The Paycheck Protection Program, $250 additional dollars for all PPPs. Basically 60 billion of that is for underbanked or underserved areas with small banking institutions between 2 billion and 50 billion in assets. So let's talk about the first big program, the SBA Guaranteed Loan Program. So this is any existing client that has an SBA loan or one that is taken out between now and September 27th of 2020. The administration, the SBA, is going to actually make your payments for you for 6 months. If you have been making your payments along, the SBA will take those over this month and will make them for the next 6 months, both principal and interest. If you went to your bank and said, hey, I need my loans deferred for 90 days. When that 90-day deferment ends, the SBA will pick up the loan payments for the next 6 months after that. Or if you happen to have been in the process or are in the process of taking out a new SBA loan and it closes before September the 27th, or it's got that all-important SBA number issued before September the 27th, 2020, then the SBA is going to make the first 6 months of payments for you. So, I have one client that we closed on his loan in December of last year. His payments basically came out to $200,000 a year. So under this program, he's saving $100 grand just right off the top because the SBA is going to make those payments for him. Okay, so let's talk about that. The first one, the EIDL loan, which was, this was the beginning loan that was under the Family First Act. And this is more of a working capital type vehicle for your small businesses. Any business that is considered small business by the SBA, and that's normally 500 employees or less. And in this particular situation, and as the PPP is now, even sole proprietors, independent contractors, co-ops, ESOPs, and Indian tribes can apply for this. The loan amounts are up to $2 million. And those are going to be determined by the SBA. So when you go in to fill out the application, once it comes online, as was mentioned earlier, you will put in your revenue and your cost of goods, along with the number of employees. And the SBA will determine, based on those numbers, how much of a loan that you're eligible for. Doesn't mean you have to take that. They're going to come to you and say, okay, you're approved for X amount of dollars, and you only want this amount of dollars. Then you can say, can we reduce the amount of the loan? The loan will be a fixed rate at 3.75, and the term will be up to 30 years. And this loan is pretty much electronically scored. So they use your credit scoring. They have a formula that is, one of my clients said, boy, they said I got a loan score of 184. What does that mean? That's a good question. So we really don't know. The first 12 months of this loan will be deferred, and so you don't have a payment even for the first year. So an interesting portion of it. So they really had, as was mentioned earlier, the SBA was the disaster loan program of the SBA was set up for things like a hurricane here or a tornado struck here. So when this disaster, the corona disaster hit, the COVID-19, their disaster relief loan program was just overwhelmed. They just couldn't keep up. So the first week was horrible. It was a disaster in itself when it came to the SBA application. There was, they took the site down, tried to do it a different way, and that didn't work. So then they passed the CARE Act on March the 27th. And the CARE Act did several things. Number one, it simplified this loan in the first place. It no longer is going to require personal guarantee if the loan amount is $200,000 or below. Took the application down to a 2-page, fill in the blank, simple, easy to a friendly application for you. And it also set up the EIDL advance. The advance is up to $10,000. And later on, under additional guidance, the SBA determined that they would do $1,000 per employee that you put down. So if you put on the application, you have 5 employees, you will get an advance for $5,000. So a little confusing. And the reason they call this an advance and not a grant, the next line, it says the advance does not need to be repaid, even if the guarantee is eventually declined for the actual loan itself. So when you get into the advanced portion, though, if you do the PPP, which we'll talk about in a moment, the advance moves over to the PPP and reduces the amount of forgiveness based on what you are given on the advance. So the advance becomes a portion of the PPP forgiveness portion. So that's why it's called an advance and not a grant, okay? These funds can be used for anything as far as working capital other than paying off an existing note. So if you have a loan at 7%, you get the EIDL at 3.75. You cannot go and pay that loan off to use for the lower rates. But you can pay them down. You can pay vendors. You can pay people that have, your supply chain maybe has been disrupted because of the virus. So this is a true working capital loan, again, available to all businesses that were open and in operations as of January 31st. So the other thing that the CARE Act brought into play was the Paycheck Protection Program, which is a PPP loan that we've heard so much about, okay? Basically, the way the loan is structured is it's based on your payroll. So you take your average monthly payroll, you multiply it times 2.5, and that is the amount that you can borrow up to. I know it says you can borrow up to 10 million, and some places did. We've heard about those, but they had sizable payroll apparently. But that's the way you calculate how much your loan amount will be. It's eligible, any company that is considered a small business, generally up to 500 employees. And as Congressman Loudermilk mentioned, places like Ruth Chris and those, in the verbiage on the CARE Act, it said per location. So that's what changed. Those restaurants were able to calculate payroll per location instead of parent company. Okay. They also, a few days later, added sole proprietors, self-employed independent contractors. And as was mentioned, a future guidance a week or so later said that that the independent contractors, since they could apply for the PPP, their payroll could not be counted as payroll for someone else. Okay. Currently there's none of the credit elsewhere guidance. If you could able to go, you have a line of credit somewhere else, you can still apply for the PPP. No personal guarantees or collateral required, and no additional fees. So they're waiving the 3% origination, things like that. Okay. This is something that that we're seeing with the new one is the business must certify the loan is to retain workers, maintain payroll, or make mortgages, whatever. So 75% of this loan would have to go towards payroll if you plan to get forgiveness on it. There is a forgiveness feature, and that is that the loan can be forgiven up to 100% of the loan. How the forgiveness works is once the loan is originated, the day that you get your money, the clock starts. So you have 8 weeks to use that money for payroll, for making rent payments, interest on mortgages, utility payments. Again, 75% of it needs to go payroll. The other 25 is for those other items. Now, if you have employees or you yourself make over 100,000, that compensation over the 100,000 mark cannot be counted in your calculation. So if, for instance, had a client earlier that he makes 120 grand. So when we went to calculate how much he could apply for, he can apply for $8,333 a month in payroll. So about $19,000. The loan forgiveness has a reduction portion. So if you don't meet the 75% category, if you don't meet the head count category where you had 10 employees in the payroll period that was considered, you only have 8 now, you will have a reduction in the amount of forgiveness. So there are penalties if you don't meet that in the forgiveness. And back to that EIDL advance, if you took an advance of $5,000, that advance will come first on the forgiveness. So if you have a $15,000 PPP, you have a $5,000 advance, then $15,000 can be forgiven, but 5 of that is the advance. So only $10,000 of the PPP would be forgiven. So you would owe the remainder at the end of the year. The loan forgiveness is not treated as taxable. Okay, so if in fact there is portions that aren't forgiven, then as of December, those loans that would convert to a 2-year fixed 1% loan, so that that those funds would be paid out over the 24-month period. And finally, some of the because it's been mentioned that we're in a situation where the PPPs, there's a logjam. There's nothing going on right now until the SBA opens up E-Tram, which is the electronic version that Congressman Loudermilk was talking about. So you might want to apply for emergency bridge loan. These are loans up to $25,000. They're done through lenders that are express lenders. They would be paid off with your PPP whenever you got the PPP in. It's just a way of getting money as of today and immediately. These can typically be turned within 24 to 48 hours. And then just an overview, some of the things that we've looked at, the maximum amount of loan, your application deadline, very important. The PPP, the deadline is going to expire as of June 30th. Everything else now is through the end of the year. The bridge loans obviously is pretty much an ongoing schedule. And this is what you can use the proceeds for. And I think if I remember correctly, we have some handouts, each and that all of you should be able to get as well. So with that being said, we turn it over. I think Keith, you're going to give me some questions.
I sure am, Daniel. Thank you so much. I appreciate that presentation. And as Daniel mentioned, we will be getting this out to everybody, the presentation, and then the video will also make available as well, because it's we're currently recording the webinar. So I know that was asked earlier, so we will be posting that on our applicable channels online and social media. So first question for you, Daniel, is, and I think you may have touched on this, so, but I'm going to ask it anyhow because I want clarification. I've been told if 10,000 was received from idle and then PPP received, that the 10,000 forward will be required to be repaid. But you said that just carries over as part of the forgiveness, correct?
Right. So if you got a 10,000 idle advance, then you get a PPP for 10,000. Only 10,000 can be forgiven. So that idle advance actually comes over to the PPP, and at the end of the year, 12 months down the road, or at the December, that will convert to a 24-month 1% interest loan.
Yes, sir. Okay. Next question is, and Congressman Loudermilk mentioned this, that the banks would receive an e-file number, and once they have that, it's locked in. Does the applicant also get a notification when that e-file number is received, or is that, I mean, is it
No.
at the same time?
Yeah, and part of my history, that I was a lender for 20 years, 3 of which was strictly SBA lending. So what we're referring to, it's called E-Tran. Basically, the bank approves the loan, as Congressman Loudermilk alluded to. It's their loan. So they approve the loan. They electronically send the file to SBA. The SBA turns around and sends them a number. Once that lender gets a number, under the statute, he has 10 days to close this loan. So you will hear very quickly from that lender to get the documents to you. And
Yes.
now they're doing electronically with electronic signatures.
Understood. Next question is, can an LLC that owns rental property in Florida, St. Simons, Jekyll, etc., apply for the idle loan? They noted they are losing money not being able to rent to people.
Sure. Yeah, that loan is for working capital, things like that. There are some special guidelines and regulations on real estate holdings. You need to check with someone on that. But typically, if you're losing rent money, then yeah, you fall under that category. So
Yes, sir. Thank you. Can businesses reapply for the idle advance if they have already received an advance from the first round of funding?
no, there's one shot only.
Okay. And I think we know the answer to this question, but if you do only idle and receive an advance and not PPP, you don't have to pay that advance, correct?
Right.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, you don't, even if you don't get the idle loan, you don't have to pay the advance back. So.
Gotcha. All right. Next question. Can I apply for this second round for idle or PPP if my application for the first CARES Act is still pending or in process?
Okay, so if you've applied for a PPP already, you can apply, as mentioned, some of the banks that have, the larger banks seem to be slower. I get a lot of people asking, can I go to my community bank now? Because they're under the new guidelines, $60 billion is going to go to smaller community banks. And we get a lot of people asking, can I go apply over here? Yes, you can, but you're starting the whole process over. So, if you're already in that queue waiting for that electronic trend to go through, you might be a day or so away from getting that. yes, you can. It just, you might slow up the process if you do. So
Gotcha. So if they did, would that kick their first application out because it's under the same tax ID, or would it just create confusion?
it would create more confusion, because then if, you know, it will flag. And a lot of the conversation has been going on that advance. Has the lender going to know that you even got an advance? Well, they're both SBA products. You'd be, you know, both of them will show up in the same file. So the same thing that with the additional application. Plus, you're just slowing up the process for everybody, because now you got two different banks processing applications.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Next question is, what does the SBA expect the average loan amount to be for small businesses in the second round? Last time it was noted as roughly $250,000 per business on average. Is that accurate, or what are your thoughts on that?
It was actually closer to 150, but even that was skewed. You know, so it's going to be a different. I think it's going to be much smaller, based on the fact that EIDL has been given so much more money. You're looking at, you know, 60 billion versus 9 billion in the EIDL loan. So we anticipate the loan amounts will be smaller. We did, you know, some of our clients, I have one client that got a $500,000 EIDL loan. So it just varies. But the Treasury has issued guidances today as well on the large entities, it's called a good faith guidance, where if the borrower knows that he can survive without taking the larger loan, then under their guidance, he is required to report that and not take the disbursement. So
Understood.
we think smaller loans will be prevalent.
Yes, sir. Next question is kind of twofold. If I have laid off my employees, can I rehire them after receiving PPP? And then what if those laid off employees have received unemployment and they get the PPP and rehire them? Do those employees then need to repay back that unemployment?
No. Okay. So yes, you can. But that's the idea. Is get people back to work. And an interesting portion of that is under the CARE Act, the unemployment, it's called FPUC, the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation Act portion. In the state of Georgia, the employee can make up to $300 and still draw unemployment. Okay, so you could bring them back as a partial unemployment applicant. You know, they can still get up to $300 and if they make at least $1 in unemployment, they get the $600 stimulus, no matter what. Okay, so we calculated that out yesterday. One person, you know, they can make $1,200 a week on unemployment and working part-time. Now that $300 is, you know, that limits them, because, you know, they're not going to make you can't, above that 300, they start taking dollar for dollar back off the state benefit. Yeah, that's the idea, is get them back to work.
Yes, sir. Understood. Another question is kind of twofold. Is the SBA, or as someone's trying to confirm their application was received and in queue, how do they do so? And the next portion of that is, why is the SBA unable to locate or provide any information to those idle applicants when they call to follow up, even if they already have an application number?
Right. So again, I mentioned the SBA disaster relief team. They were used to having, you know, dealing with a hurricane in Panama City, or they were used to, you know, a tornado in Oklahoma or whatever. Never in their wildest dreams did they anticipate the response and the reactions to this. So most of this is done electronically. It's just, you know, the application's now put up, it electronically scores it, and it moves it down the line. So you have someone maybe sitting in Sacramento and just doesn't have the tools to it. there is no, when it first issued, there was a click to check your application, because at the end of each application, it issues a number. Okay, so you have a confirmation number that your application has been at least uploaded. So what we have suggested at this point is pull your credit. Just go to Credit Karma or one of those credit bureau services, check and see if they've checked pulled your credit to see where you are, and when it was done. That's one way you can tell if your application is still moving down the line. But understand that the SBA was never set up for this type of disaster relief. It just wasn't, and if you go to their website, they're trying to hire loan analysts and customer service and those people all the time. So it is what it is. But yeah, there's no way to check idle right now.
Understood. Okay, we've got about enough time for 2 more questions.
Right.
So next one is, how many employees should we have put on our idle loan toward the 10K grant? Or I guess not necessarily a grant, but if we have an LLC for one person who also hires a lot of 1099 help, should we have put more than one?
Okay, so 1099s do not count as of right now. And we heard that conversation earlier. So if you have an LLC and you are the one person, $1,000 coming your way.
Yep. So do we have, and the Congressman kind of alluded to this a little bit, do we have any idea, or have you heard anything as well on when that 1099 adjustment could be remedied?
There's a phase that the Congressman didn't mention. Those 1099s and sole props can also now apply for unemployment. So that's another, avenue stream with that $600 stimulus. So and as many PPPs and idles loans that have gone out, I think if they try to make an adjustment at this point, it's going to cause more problems than anything. So I really don't anticipate it. I anticipate the PPP money to be gone by the middle of next week.
That was going to be my next question. How fast do you think this will be gone? And I mean, people who are tuning in right now, if they have the need to apply for either of these, they should probably be looking to pull the trigger now.
Yesterday,
right?
Yeah.
2 days ago.
I actually heard, one of my clients told me that he had heard from one of our local banks that they had 100,000 applications already in the pipeline, and that as soon as everything hit, all of those start going. They didn't anticipate even taking new applications because they had so many already in the pipeline. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Well, thank you again, Daniel. Very informative. Sure. Appreciate your time. At this point, I'm going to flip it back to Misty again.
Misty,
do we have you?
She's coming. I'm actually going to add some comments really quickly, and then Misty's going to pop back up too. But thank you so much for moderating and for taking care of the Q&A. That's a tremendous help, and definitely a big thank you to Shauna too for what she did in getting everything coordinated today. And it's always good to be on the same screen with Misty. We've worked together for a long time and appreciate the partnership and working out these webinars recently to be able to offer such great subject matter during this unprecedented time to both the chamber membership, the public, the investors through the co-ed campaign that they've been working on now. And it's good to be able to come to the table together to do that. Daniel, thank you for your insight. And we know that it's ever changing. And so when we spoke yesterday afternoon, he said it could be different by tomorrow. I think this is my presentation. It may look different tomorrow. So we appreciate what he did. And of course, Congressman Loudermilk. I mean, as we heard, he flew in late, but he got back and he's at home safe and sound and ready to continue working from the district. And so we appreciate him very, very much, and his team. John Wallace, as Misty mentioned, and Claire Bartlett has been a great friend from their office as well. So I hope that everybody found the information today beneficial. Hope you have a relaxing weekend, and I'll turn it over to Misty.
Thanks, Pam. Goodness. Hang on, I've lost my notes here. Thank you to all of our speakers today. Thank you, Pam, for your ongoing partnership as we serve the Cherokee business community together. To our businesses, I hope that these webinars have been helpful to you in navigating these programs. I know I learned something new every time I hear Daniel and Drew speak, and having the congressman with us today was great. Please reach out to us if you have any questions, needs, or suggestions going forward. Heath, thank you for being our host today. You did a great job as usual. Please follow us on social media, both with the Chamber and our office with the Cherokee Office of Economic Development for updates, as well as our websites, CherokeeChamber.com and CherokeeGA.org. Stay safe as we move forward with reopening the state, and enjoy your weekend. Thank you for being in Cherokee by Choice.